It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It is the Take Command podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. As we sit here recording, 2 training camp practices in the books, a third one on the way for Friday. Day off, fans in on Saturday, and then Logan Monday. The pads go on. Going to be a lot of fun to get out there next week when they start banging around for real, but today, we will talk about what we've seen so far, the structure of practice, the build-up, kind of some choices made by the staff on a structural level. We'll get into how Jayden Daniels has looked for the first couple days, and then some of the other key names that we are watching as things go. But Logan, Dan Quinn, Commanders camp number 1, 2 days in, 75-minute practice yesterday, a little over 90 today, so they're clearly ramping up. They've chosen to do some situational work at a heavier dosage than I think a lot of other camps that you were a part of and that I've covered. But what do you make so far of how they've designed this thing and what they're getting out of it?
Yeah, I think, obviously like back when I first started playing in 2010, and then obviously for the majority of my playing career, just when I started to retire, you started to see this type of practice structure early in the off season. Obviously early on, or previously, it was like, hey man, we're going to go hard. We're going to go 2.5 hours, whatever the time allotment is. We're going to make sure we hit that. The problem is, like, as good a shape as you think you're in, as much as you've prepped in the off season, your body's just not ready to go. So, and like you see a lot of soft tissue injuries early in camp, which, when you have such a limited time frame, and again, training camp is a limited time frame to get ready for the season, even including preseason, any kind of injury is a huge setback, even, like an ankle pull, a calf strain, something like that. So I think what Dan's done here and what the staff's done is really, really smart. So what they're doing, obviously you mentioned the kind of the brevity of practice, right? The 75 minutes, the 90 minutes. That's awesome. As a player, like psychologically, that's so alleviating because you're like, oh, okay, just got to be out here for a little bit, a couple team periods, and we go. The other thing I love is you mentioned the situational stuff, and I got to talk to Dan briefly about this, and he mentioned in his presser how they're doing red zone to start. And the one thing I love about that is that it limits the volume, so the amount of high intensity, high speed yards. So if you think about it, if you're working from the 50, working like normal route concepts, you can push that deep post, the fade, the deep crossing route a little bit more. Here, with the red zone only, you're working from the 20 in. And I think today we saw that they worked from like the 40 in, right? They just did some like kind of shorter stuff. And I think that, again, is just a really smart way to make sure everybody is coming along and is in shape at the same time. I love the position of the off day also in terms of like making sure guys will go 3 days off, right? And then they'll have the first day of pads. I think that's brilliant, as opposed to trying to squeeze that first day of pads in on that Saturday, or what is it, Sunday, whatever day that is.
Yeah, Saturday it would be if they didn't take it off.
Right. I think that's really smart. Like, don't squeeze it in. Just give them another non-padded day. Give them the off day. Let them fully recover, and then think about it in terms of like a little bit of like a line graph. It's going up, 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 up. You get a nice down day to recover, back up with the intensity, and then kind of the same thing. So I just think it's smart. I think it's the way that people should be treating their players, and it's not that the intensity is any different. The intensity is very high, obviously very competitive in the competitive periods, but I just think it's smart to let the players acclimate. And I think the tools that he's using to get that done are also really smart.
Yeah, no, I agree. The high-speed running stuff is very, very important, and that's a strength and conditioning, like sports science-y driven thing. Like you want to make sure you ramp that up. On a very smart way. The sprinting, like that's where your soft tissue stuff comes in. And if you don't give people the room to run 60 yards, well, then it's not a huge problem. And even the special team stuff, like there's a lot of short bursty stuff that's happening, but they're concentrating everything down into the finite skills that you need. I think that was one of the most other interesting things today that we saw, something that I have never seen before in any camp that I have covered. I don't know if you've either seen or participated in anything like this. They basically, at the start of practice, after one individual or after some of the individual sessions, they had a full team football camp. And what I mean by that is literally every player on the roster outside of the specialists and the quarterbacks went through a 3-stage circular or cyclical, stations drill. One station was a scoop and score drill. So ball's on the ground, you got to pick it up, and I guess it's really scoop. The scoring was just more about the scoop. a tackle pursuit drill where it was 3 players, one got a ball, and like you had wide receivers catching footballs and then having the other 2 players pursue. And then you also had Dante Fowler and Cleveland Ferrell and defensive ends and everybody catching footballs. The second player would pursue. A third player would come from behind in pursuit and try to punch the ball out. Or I guess the second player was oncoming, not in pursuit, as a tackler. And then the third station was a kind of route running adjacent catching drill. And every single player that was skill position, lineman, whatever, I guess the O-line wasn't in there, but everyone else that could possibly touch the football was in these drills. And I think I was talking to you during them, and you said, part of this is just the camaraderie and kind of doing things together. But I also think that, like, when we think about why are Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. defenses so good around the ball, like, the skills required to do that stuff are actually practiced. What a concept. You emphasize the things that you think are important, and to see kind of this full team period dedicated to rudimentary basic football skills, I think was beneficial, cool, and interesting, and hopefully, I'd say hopefully good in the long term.
Yeah, and I've done stuff like that in college. I did it when I was with Dan in Atlanta. We'd do something similar, and obviously the point of the emphasis of that little period changed. This is like ball focused, right? So, ball on the ground, pick it up. Offensive players got to do it. Defensive players got to do it. When ball is life and there's a fumble, and you practice it a little bit more than the other team, it becomes a little bit easier to do, right? One of the drills that I liked a lot was receivers catching the ball or ball catchers catching the ball, because they had DBs do it, like you mentioned. You split 2 bags, and then there's a pursuit guy coming kind of to understand the angle you need to take when the ball is exposed after the guy split 2 defenders, and it forces the receiver or the ball carrier to kind of think about tucking that ball away, even though you've kind of broken through contact, because the initial reaction is you break through that contact, ball gets a little bit loose, and that's where the ball punches out. So I really liked that they kind of had some specificity there in terms of ball catchers, ball handlers, and even for guys making interceptions, it plays very similar. You pick the ball off, you're running, looking towards the center, and then the receiver comes in pursuit and punches the ball out. So again, I think it just, you mentioned it, you hit the nail on the head there. Teams that I've talked to a bunch of different coaches about this, and I say how do you promote turnovers? How do you promote getting the ball out? And oftentimes they say, we talk about it a lot. But I also think it needs to be more than talk. It needs to be like a way of life. So here you've dedicated 10 minutes, 12 minutes of practice to ball security, ball awareness. And I think, again, to your point, that's not going to be a one-to-one corollary, but it does pay dividends down the road, because you get it's at the front of mind for everybody, and I think that's extremely important. If the ball is the main thing, treat it like the main thing. Talk about it, be about it, drill it, and I think you see kind of the early stages of that philosophy for Dan Quinn.
Yeah, and if you want to be solid on the fundamentals, practice the fundamentals. And they're out there practicing fundamentals along those lines as well. We've never seen officials out here this early. Officials have been at practice every single day. Typically, that's kind of coaches just call stuff if it's egregious. But then you get in games and the officials call it tighter. I understand coaches sometimes want to let guys play. It's more pickup basketball rules than it is we're out there with basketball officials, if you will. But that's not, you're playing in the NFL. There's officials in every game. There are no pickup rules. So you better get used to the contact level that's allowed, the amount of holding that's allowed, the grabbing that's allowed. You better be on top of your alignments and all those details, and having the officials out there is one less thing that the coaches have to worry about to try to officiate practice as well as coach and run it. So that's a detail-oriented thing that I thought was great. And then, when it comes to working in red zone, Logan, this is where you make your money. This is where you win games. It's where you score points. And in that very simplistic way, I don't get why every team doesn't practice red zone more early on in camp. I know the predominance of the game is played on first and second down in the middle of the field, but if scoring is how you win games, practicing scoring seems like a good idea. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, it is. It's really important. I think, people say, we struggled in the red zone last year, or people, whatever, struggled in 2 minutes. If you struggled at it and you want to get better at it, give it more time. And I think this is a great way to give that area of the field and that specific kind of challenging section of football more time, while also kind of protecting the players and making sure the installs go well. So not only did they get a full team period of red zone, but they get a 7-on-7 of red zone also. which I love to see because again, I think it's also good for the quarterbacks too, because the one thing I'd be concerned about is that is the more challenging part for the quarterback. Tight windows, understanding pressure packages, throwing on time, throwing with rhythm. And I think when you look at what Jayden's done in that area, it's been great. So I think, to your point, the more time you spend on something, the better. And obviously they're prioritizing things they want to prioritize, but they're also being smart about it in terms of making sure that the guys are healthy and safe.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Anything else structurally with the way they ran practice and have run it the first 2 days that you noticed, or anything moving forward that you're looking forward to seeing that you wanted to highlight in particular?
Yeah, I do like also the emphasis on special teams. I think that's been good to see early on. They've had 2.
You loved the one drill today.
I did love that one drill. So yeah, basically like they did a punt coverage, like punt protection to a light coverage portion of practice at the beginning where you get guys catching and you get the blocking service of the punt team working different combinations. So I always think that's fun to see different combinations, like who are the starters, who are the backups. And I think, quite honestly, they've done a pretty good job of kind of mix matching those groups and just getting different body types in there and different people playing next to each other, which is great. And then the second drill was more of what I would say like a coverage emphasis. So they brought the big hoops out, those big kind of like pass rushing hoops. And you're like, oh, what are they doing? Are they rushing the passer? Are they practicing blocking kicks? Like, what's going on? And they did a coverage drill. So what you do is you get 2 hoops, you get 2 players on each hoop, and you have them follow each other in a counterclockwise circle. Then the coach will say, go, and you, as the player on the hoop, have to finish the hoop to like basically the 3 o'clock mark on the hoop. Does that make sense? So if he says go at 12, I need to run all the way around to 3, and then I need to run into coverage. And so what is happening with that is basically like one of the things that I always hated about punt coverage early in my career was like, they're like, we want to fan the coverage. So like the guards will be, on the right or left shoulder of the returner, the tackles will be 5 yards outside of that. The wings will be five yards outside of that. The problem with that is that like people get held up at different rates. So even though I'm the guard and I might not be the one who's closest to the football. So what this teaches you how to do is like the first guy out has a landmark on the returner. I think it's like, probably contain it, outside shoulder. The second guy is playing off of that guy. So if the returner splits it, you fit basically what would be like the A gap. And if the returner bounces it, then you basically bounce to the B gap and you would make the tackle. So I think that's just such a good drill because, again, it's so relevant. And there's a problem with punt coverage, right? It's people get on different levels. How do you rep it? Most coaches just say, go out there and run and we'll figure it out. It's a detailed thought process towards saying, this is the issue with this team. Now, how do we get more reps at getting good at this subtle nuance? So much like picking up the football or being aware of certain ball security situations, I thought this was just a really good drill because of the specificity that it brought to the drill. And it was also good to see the guys that did a really good job with it, like the Christian Holmes, the Percy Butlers, the Tyler Owens, the guys you'd expect that are good special teams guys, Jeremy Reeves, right? The good special teams guys were good at this drill because they understand the fit process. They understand how to be decisive to the football. So I think it's also, in addition to being very relevant, it also shows you the guys who are good and have a feel for teams, and in a way that most coverage drills don't.
Yeah, for sure. I will also add on that drill, Sainer still is with the returners,
yes.
And boy, is he quick.
Very quick.
He could definitely find himself, depending on how some other things go with the roster, returning punts this year. Because, God, he's got a skill for it, and
also,
if he gets a pick.
Also, a fun note is, like, everyone talks about him returning kicks, playing defense. Afterwards, he stayed after practice and ran routes with the backup receivers for 15 minutes. Like, he runs slants, he runs choices, he ran a dig. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, in terms of things I would do, I wouldn't think that would be it. But like, it was cool to see him again, the quickness in the punt return. He played receiver in college and still doing that, still working his ball skills. Frankie Louvu stayed after and worked pass rush. Like, it was, the whole D-line stayed and did conditioning. It was awesome to see everybody kind of stay. The tight ends went and caught balls together, like stay and kind of work their craft a little bit. And just how guys chose to spend that time. Sorry to cut you off about that, but I thought that was so interesting.
No, that's good. I'll also say this. I feel like some of these guys that we've seen for years here are in just better shape physically. I think John and Duran specifically stand out. Like, one, they look cut up in a way that they have never looked before. Not that they've been like out of shape. They've been borderline all pro players, but they're in a different level, have taken it to new heights. And then you see it on the field. Like you see John Allen downfield pursuing and you're like, oh man, that was pretty quick. Like he got down there with some urgency. Yeah. And so both it's the clarity and the assignment of where you need to be, but also the physical ability to get there. And one note I had today in the red zone stuff, the 11 on 11s, like Deron Payne made a ton of plays. Mm-hmm. Got in the backfield, pass rush, like he's disruptive. And I had a great chat with Nick Allegretti today after practice. That folks can check out on my YouTube page and on the Team 980's YouTube page. And he's like, man, blocking Allen sucks. I hate it every single day. That guy's so good. And so, seeing John get back to after the disappointing year last year where he was super duper hampered by that foot and just, probably not able to get in this kind of shape last year because you couldn't work out as hard with the foot stuff. So it's great to see those guys and putting the extra work in the off season and then putting in the extra work after practice every single day. Had a great chat with BSJ earlier in the week that folks can check out as well. Had to wait on doing that chat because he had to make sure that he got his reps in on the jugs machine. And so guys are taking this extra work seriously. It's kind of the standard. Terry talked about it on Wednesday. They've all made this pledge to themselves, to each other. That's just different. That's not from the coaches. It's player driven. And I think doing all the right things about what it means to be a commander is a part of that. And, for each guy, it's a little different what they have to do, but these guys seem to be taking it very seriously. Yeah,
I remember when I was in Atlanta, they had like a player-led portion of practice. And again, this is after Dan had been there for a while. And it was like, hey, like Logan, you're the veteran. Like, what are the guys going to do today for practice? Like our post-practice 10-minute period. And it was like, oh, we're going to hit the sled, or we're going to hit the bag, or we're going to work pass pro, or we're going to work routes, whatever
if
we
felt like. You
were
in charge, you were definitely hitting something.
We were definitely hitting a lot of stuff. And it was relevant because a lot of the guys were like converted wide receivers, or, one of the guys down there was a rugby player playing football. And so like they needed reps with that. But I think that's awesome because you're seeing shades of that happen already is what the reason I bring that up, right? Is you see guys, you mentioned Terry, like we're accountable to each other. You see St. Juice catching the football, like St. We're still running routes. Another thing Frankie Louvu did is they had Pittman and I forget the other guy's name, number 47 were out there. They were talking pass rush technique. These are like off-ball linebacker types that are working together to kind of get better pass rush stuff. And then all the young kind of UDFA back roster receiver guys were down with Sam Hartman throwing the football. And we have not seen that structure here for a couple of years, with Ron being out there. And there is something to that. There is something to players taking extreme ownership of something and wanting to be better and wanting to improve. And kudos to Dan and the staff for like giving them that time. It'd be so easy to say, hey man, you got to be inside for the lift right now. Like everyone inside for the lift. And it's like, no, you get 20 minutes on the field. Take your time, get what you got to get done, and then we'll go lift. So I think, again, it speaks to kind of the structure, the thoughtfulness, the deliberate nature of practice. I think it shows up even in the post-practice stuff, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, quarterbacks, how they look so far. I definitely have a couple notes in my handy-dandy notebook that if people are watching on YouTube and see me looking down, it's because I actually have real notes. I'm a reporter, Logan. No, I'm not. I'm a talk show guy who fakes being a reporter.
Notes, have you seen John Keim's notes? Have you ever looked at those suckers?
Yeah, I've talked an inordinate amount about John Keim's notes the last couple of days. Have you? It's because I was making jokes about the fact that I now am taking like paper and pen notes, where I was always just a do notes in my phone kind of guy, and I need a better system. And John has developed a system of scribble over 31 training camps of doing this and 31 years of doing this that nobody else can read. He can't read it if it's years later. But in the moment, if he can scribble the right things, it will trigger a memory for him that he can put into a better long-form note. So yeah, I have seen John Keim's notes, and I was actually, as folks are hearing this, I will be on the John Keim Report on Saturday. We recorded today, and I got to see some John Keim note-taking live. I also got to see the John Keim intro live. I am awkwardly standing over his shoulder for folks that want to watch that on YouTube as he does his little introduction, and then he brings me in.
I have to watch it now.
What an experience that was to see the welcome to my podcast on the John Keim Report live in living color.
Isn't there some type of, I know we're kind of sidetracking here, isn't there some type of like reporter shorthand or like note-taking shorthand. Have you heard about that? It's a system. I wonder if he knows that system, or is this just a John Keim?
I think either John or Sam Fortier, because I'm gonna guess one of those two said it to you. They were lying to you and pulling your leg.
No. This is before I even met. It was like in high school. Like I had a friend whose mom knew how to do this. It was like 10 symbols representing. It was like kind of complicated, but you could write basically as fast as someone could talk, which was the goal of the system. And I wonder if he knows that at all. But
I wonder if he does. If he does, and he's going to claim to do it, no, he's not. John's just scribbling. The one thing that I do think John, that I've taken from John is you got to use the numbers. Using numbers helps you write so much faster. So like 52, blah, blah, blah. But like John would be like 52, circle, 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 and somehow know what it means.
Circle, circle, squiggle, it's triangle. It's like really odd. But anyway, yeah, we digress. But, hey, maybe if you're listening to this and you know what that note system's called, leave a comment, and we'd appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, let us know the thing that we're trying to talk about and failing miserably. Somewhere down here, I got 5 written down a bunch. What have you seen from Jayden Daniels so far? He and Marcus are splitting reps. Jayden's been the first guy out in a lot of the situational stuff. Marcus has been number one in the other stuff. But they're mixing and matching personnel so much. It's they're both kind of working evenly with the 1-0 line, the 1 starters, but as operationally, what have you seen from Jayden so far?
Yeah, it was just to be clear, so when he goes out first, sometimes he's going out with the 2s, Jayden. And again, it doesn't mean that he's starting or that they've made a decision yet. They're all kind of working evenly, and I will say they've done a really good job. In past camps, it's been like, oh, these guys are going to start, or this is what they're thinking. And I feel like this group specifically, you have an idea, but they're so good at rotating people through and kind of presenting different packages. You're kind of like, is this guy starting? Is that guy working with this guy? Or are they just working in tandem here? So I do think that I don't know if that's intentional, but that's something I've noticed a little bit this offseason. So yeah, with Jayden, I think in the red zone, man, I expected it, honestly, for him to come out and struggle a little bit over the first 2 days, and that has not really been the case. I think he's done a good job of understanding the coverage, understanding where the ball should go. Today there was one where I was all ready to be mad at him. Like he looked to the corner, it was man coverage, he didn't let it go, rightfully so. And I thought, oh, he's going to take a sack here. And he's so quick with his feet in the pocket, quick reset, and he knew exactly where the ball needed to go. So I was like, dang, that's pretty big time stuff. The way he's anticipating throws. I know this wasn't in the red zone, but he had that beautiful throw to Zach Ertz today. They had a little, kind of what I would call like a Tony concept, like an out and a go, and a high cross. It's like Y cross. It's like every high school play in the country runs it. And I was like, nobody's open. This play's dead. He anticipated the throw. Zach ran a great route. The dark arts of route running, like we always talk about, taking an awesome angle to cut the safety off. Great catch. And I just was like, man, that's cool to see day 2 of training camp. And again, it's not always with a rush, which is the other thing that we need to negotiate here with him. But I do think that his process and how he's been working through his stuff, especially when compared to Marcus Mariota, just seems to be pretty locked in, wouldn't you say, Craig?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the difference in the 2 of them is pretty stark. And it's the exact opposite of what it should be based off their experience levels. Like you should see the rookie struggling to decipher what is going on and where the ball should go accordingly. And instead, Marcus is out there running around, holding the ball too long, scrambling, trying to extend plays where there's stuff to be had. And it just doesn't look nearly as fluid. I think that the other thing that really has stood out between the 2 of them that feels backwards based off their experience is the situational work. One thing I wrote down today in the move the ball drill. So it was 1:25 on the clock. I think they had about 50 yards. They might have lined it up at the 45, but they're midfield area. I don't see. We were kind of in the end zone watching it, so it was hard to see exactly where they started. But 1:25, basically half the field to go, and the amount of plays that Jayden got off in that drill, it was like a 12-play drive. It was ridiculous. And the ability to manage
Saturday, right?
Yeah, to manage the clock like that and go all right, we got, this, I got to get out of bounds. Okay, hit it, bang, out of bounds. Here, we got to spike it. We got he managed that so well, and the sheer volume of plays they were able to get off because he was able to execute the right thing at the right time was really, really impressive. He drew defense off sides a couple times throughout practice today. There's just a command of quarterbacking and situations and kind of the game that just is so high level for a kid his age and his experience level. And that is really exciting because that stuff is harder, I feel like, to teach. And it also shows a mental capacity to process a lot of information. And we'll see what happens again. That's all fine until John Allen comes up the A gap, and then it's even worse when it's Vita Vea week 1. But to show that proclivity already is I think really impressive and I also think meaningful.
Yeah, no, I think so. And again, he's not. I feel like I have to say this every time we talk about him because I think he is doing a good job. I think the ball comes out well. I think his anticipation's good. I think his footwork's been good. But he still is. There's a lot of things he still needs to work on. There's times where in 7-on-7, I think he's holding the ball a tick too long, and that's a big pet peeve of mine. Even back when I was playing, 7-on-7 because there's no rush, it's not real. But again, he's in the test that he's being provided. He's doing a good job, which I appreciate. And so again, like he's still a rookie. He's still working through some stuff. I think we've been really impressed overall, but. Yeah, man, he just gets it. He just gets where the ball needs to go and when it needs to be there. Someone came up to me today and says like, oh, do you think that ball that he missed to Zach today is a bad thing? And I was like, absolutely not, because he's on time and Zach gets held. So it's not Zach's fault either. The defense probably would have got a PI, but I think like, that's what you want your quarterback doing. That's what makes Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, that's what makes them great is they can throw to space, anticipating windows in the defense based on the concept. So I think he's done that well. And I think watching him more in the team setting, more with the rush, because again, that's the one thing that I haven't really seen from him. I've been really impressed with the tight window throws here in the red zone. Again, like to see more of that because that was something he didn't do a lot of in college, but it all seems to be progressing in the right way. And your comparison to Marcus, I think, is very on the nose. I think Marcus, for whatever reason, there's times where he delivers a great ball, and you're like, wow, there you go. That's a guy who's played a lot of NFL football.
Yeah, he had a deep ball to Terry today, and in his move the ball drill, that was money.
It was money. And again, you see the talent, you see his athleticism. He had a scramble today that probably went for a touchdown. Like, it's there, but there's also stuff where you're like, dang. And so I think just the level of consistency over 2 days of practice, right? Let's just put that modifier out there, has been much higher for Jayden.
For sure. I'm curious on Jayden, like one play that comes to mind is the end of that move the ball drill. He throws a touchdown to McNichols. It's a little late. It's a little off schedule. But I feel like on some of those plays, like Jayden has the ability to manipulate the pocket in a way that's real. That's not just because he's not getting sacked because it's training camp, but that's like real pocket manipulation. A little bit of extra time gets bought, and then he knows whether he knows or has a very high level ability to find what pops in those scramble situations. Like, oh, that's chaos. That means there's space over there. And oh, look, it's Jeremy McNichols. Oh, look, it's Luke McCaffrey. Oh, look, it's whatever guy is wide open in the end zone because something else went haywire because I've extended this play. Is that real, or is that because he's getting to, or is it because he's getting to play longer because people aren't actually sacking him?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's hard to tell. Like I will say on that series, there was let's just walk through it. So 3 plays before, Norrell Pollard, I think, probably has a sack. Like that little stumpy kind of sawed-off explosive dude from Virginia Tech just gets out on the cadence, swims the center, for sure a sack. Ball gets out, it's completed. Great job, Jayden. But that's in real life, that's probably a sack, right? Next play, Jayden draws him off sides, right? So Pollard goes out because he jumped off sides, and so does the left end. I forget who it was. Both jumped off sides. They're both out. The next play after that is a touchdown. And I would say that like using cadence in that way, drawing those guys off sides, understanding what the defensive line is doing and what they're trying to get accomplished, using cadence to slow them down and give your offensive line a better opportunity. And then again, like reading that concept out and understanding like, there's like a little sit concept with a flat, nothing too crazy. He looks at the sit, the defense kind of miscommunicates it. Like you said, he buys a little bit of time, floats that ball right to McNichols, kind of over the shoulder in the front of the end zone there. And that felt real to me. Now, I can't see the rush. I can't see the protection. But I do think if you look at the sequence there and how he set that up using his cadence, I think that's real. And that's good football. And that's being smart. And great job by the offensive line not jumping offside. So I think that's the other thing that sticks out is like good process, way to get it communicated, and then understanding kind of how to maximize your O-line. Everyone talks about the O-line and how worried we need to be, but if you use tools like cadence, like running the football, they had some big runs today in team run. I don't know if you saw some of those. Those were great.
Yeah.
But that type of stuff I think is going to pay dividends. And again, you have a quarterback who can help you execute that. That just makes it all the easier.
Yeah, Eckler, nice big one on a duo. You're like, oh, that's duo. And I was like, oh, that's Eckler running.
Yeah.
Got through clean on that one. So, yeah, that was good to see today. And obviously much more excited to evaluate the running game once the pads go on. But to just from a timing standpoint, get the combinations and things right, to get things actually targeted correctly, that's good stuff and about as good as you can do this time of year. The other thing that I thought was interesting on the quarterback front before we get to a couple of other guys we want to talk about is during that move the ball drill with Mariota, he just kept going to Terry.
Yeah.
Terry on Forbes. Forbes had a couple of nice plays. Terry got him for the big one deep, got him for another short one. But it was a fun battle between those two, which is great. But I'm also curious. I would love to be able to watch the practice tape and be like, all right, was it man and you're just picking your matchup? Like why were you so insistent on going to 17? Because as someone who's been begging for Terry to get the ball for years, I'm excited about it, but that did seem like a lot in one drill.
Yeah, I kind of was like, we were talking about on the sideline, like, is this like just the philosophy now? Like when you're in, if I'm Marcus Mariota and I'm having a hard time seeing it, like I'm just gonna throw the ball to Terry a bunch.
Heineke left him a bleep it Terry's down there somewhere, shirt behind.
Yeah, it's in his locker somewhere. But that's kind of what it felt like. And kudos to Forbes, man. I thought he did a great job in that sequence of battling, being physical, using his length. Obviously, there was the deep one which we couldn't decide. Like when you're watching practice, like I was watching like the core. And then you see the ball go and you see him want to go. It felt like it might have been a double move. But,
right.
And that's something that Forbes has to work on or continue to work on. But I just thought there was a physicality, a competitiveness, all the things we saw from him in college, all the highlights we saw from him, for example, in that New England game last year, like I thought were there. And Terry's going to get his because Terry's a good football player. But I thought that was encouraging for Terry. It was encouraging to see Mariota's confidence in Terry, but it was also encouraging to see the level of kind of dog competitor that we got from Forbes. And he's been again, I thought he had a good offseason, but to see that and know that they're coming after you and kind of stick in there and make plays, like I thought that was a good character moment for him. And so it was a really kind of a fun sequence. And that's, again, like it's hard to glean a ton from training camp, but those are cool moments where you're like, okay, like that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. Like has Forbes turned a corner from that competitive compete standpoint? Terry's looking in good shape. Like does that chemistry with Marcus and Terry lead to something down the road? But that was a pretty neat sequence.
Yeah, I will say if Marcus winds up being the backup, to come in and just be like, I'm going to throw to Terry a lot, that's a good plan as a backup.
Yeah.
And if you're Marcus, like throw to Terry or run. Running for Marcus is a good thing.
Yeah, he did score that touchdown today, which is great.
No, that was, reason he was who he was coming out of school, coming out of that Oregon offense with Chip back in the day. Let's wrap up with some notes on some other guys. Let's actually start with Forbes. And I'm going to say this hesitantly, Logan. I feel like he finally got a little bit bigger. Like he's still very thin. But I do feel like his legs, his lower half are like he finally put on a little bit of weight, which cool. Like it's going to be a years-long process to get him, bigger and stronger over time. He's going to have to find out what weight he should play at and kind of feel it out for his body. Every athlete's unique, but it's cool to see. And then you add that with the competitiveness, and you do wonder like, okay, is Emmanuel Forbes maybe back on track? And then, how does he ultimately play? But what have you seen from Forbes so far? And are my eyes lying to me that maybe finally he's put on a little bit of weight?
Maybe I'm not as like detail oriented as you or Linnell or anybody else, but people will be like, dude, Ridgeway looks pretty fit. And you're like, I guess he kind of looks the same to me. You know what I mean? So maybe he's bigger, maybe he's not. I think he's playing better, and that's the thing that I'm more concerned about. I think he's playing more confident. I think he's fitting into the defense well. I think the same thing for St. Juice, honestly. Like over the first 2 days, obviously it's not. I'm not saying declaratively they're significantly better, but I think they've done a good job. And I think Forbes specifically, like again with that sequence today, with the last couple days of mini camp kind of fresh in the mind, like I'm positively encouraged. And maybe that's confirmation bias because I believe in Joe Witt Jr. Like I got to make a t-shirt like I believe, but I think they're playing better because of him. And because of Donatel, I think he's done a great job as well in terms of getting guys on the same page, and just that better, more consistent coaching, I think, is paying off. So is he bigger? I don't know. He looks like the athlete we saw him coming out of college and the athlete we saw at points last year, but I also think he's playing more confidently. And I think they're letting him be, maybe that's the thing I'd say that is different. They're letting him be more physical. Like last year, I was always super impressed with his click and close and how he was kind of reacting off coverage and communicating. And that was something that they emphasized in last year's defense. And it was a criticism that like Tana and Smoot had, is like, how come you're not letting Forbes press? How come you're not letting St. Juice press? These guys have long arms, let them do it. And I feel like this year you're seeing a little bit more of that. They're like, hey, get hands on guys, be aggressive. Like, we're not so much worried about PI. And I think you saw that also, again, I'm on a little bit of a rant here, but we saw it also with the defensive line. Like when I played with Dan, the defensive line coach down there was like, I don't care if you get an offsides. I don't care if you get 2. I want you to be aggressive with the snap count. And we saw that a little bit today. So maybe they're kind of pushing that envelope and like looking for those competitive advantages, which is great. So overall, I've been impressed with Forbes, but 2 days is not a, does not get you on the team. Let's just say that.
Yeah, for sure. Something that St. Juice told me the other day is, I think, really clarifying about some of the issues in the past and how Joe Witt is able to get so much out of his DBs. And basically, Juice was like, this year, let's say I'm in whatever coverage and they're telling me, go jump the post. Like if I call this and it's this situation,
I want you to do it.
I want you to go jump that post. And if they complete an out route, I don't care. You're not in trouble. And that, in fact, not only you're not in trouble, that's on me. As a coach, I will own that. That was not the case last year. Like you'd have, I've talked to Keim about this, and John's mentioned it on his podcast, so I'm going to steal Keim's bit here, but I'm going to give him credit, so it's not really stealing. Last year, you have guys that would be told one thing in the meeting room, one thing on the field, and then like one thing or another thing in the game. And so you can't play with confidence. And what happens is if you're concerned about everything, you can't cover anything.
Right.
The league is too hard. The margins are too small. And so for Forbes to be told, yeah, go do this, don't worry about that. For a player with his skill set, that is so freeing. And the other thing that Juice told me that I thought was really interesting too is the way they go about some of that with the different DBs is different. Like they realize that he and Forbes and Michael Davis are all different players, so they don't coach them all the same. And I just thought that was so clarifying of why Joe Witt Jr. gets the most out of his guys, but also, with the contrast is pretty self-evident as to why things went so sideways and upside down and backwards last year.
Yeah, and just like when you're watching film last year, and I feel for St. Juice, and I'm not trying to absolve him of responsibility for a poor year last year, and I think he would say the same thing, but I just was like, man, they're not helping this guy out. They're like, go play man-to-man against the best receiver. He's in the slot, go figure it out. Cover everything. And it's like, dang, like when you talk to Smoot, when you talk to DBs that I've played with in the past, like that's just not good ball. Like it's just not a viable thing. And so I'm glad to hear that the coaching staff is already giving these guys more tools to help kind of, NFL coverage is hard. Like I talk about the most difficult positions in football. To me, it's like offensive tackle, DB, and quarterback. Like those are the three. And a quarterback probably leads, but those other two are darn close because you're reacting the whole time to people. And if you can kind of make that reaction fit into a box, instead of having to cover every way, we're covering this sector, this 90-degree sector, we need to cover that. And we have other people to help you out with other stuff, I think is brilliant. So that's really encouraging to hear. And again, that's one of the reasons why I think you and I both are so confident that they're going to be playing better this year. And I think we've already seen shades of that. Again, but then I'm concerned that they, the physical stuff, the tackling, all that stuff, they got to do that. But from a coverage standpoint, I think I'm cautiously optimistic it's going to be significantly better.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, if you want more player interviews, and we're getting great insight from these guys. Training camp is the best because guys are open. They're not as guarded. They're also not as beaten down by a season. So we're getting really great stuff out of these guys. The Hoffman Show, we're airing our player interviews at 5:30 every single day. And then if for whatever reason, you have a life or something, you can't listen live at 5:30, and that does not fit into your life, check out the Hoffman Show podcast or watch the interviews on YouTube. Juice was great. Allegretti was incredible. And then we got a whole list of guys that we'll talk to next week as well. The other big thing I think on that, functionally from the coverage DB standpoint, I was listening to this interview that I sent you with McVay the other day on the Athletic Football Show. And Robert Mays, the host of that show, asked Sean, what do you think is the biggest difference in the NFL in the last 5 years and how things have changed? And Sean goes, I think we've realized just how important explosives are. And so generating them offensively, giving them up defensively. And if we can find ways to just limit the explosives defensively, like we're in a great spot. We're going to be competitive, even if we don't have the Aaron Donald, et cetera, as Sean's trying to figure that out and how they move forward defensively in LA. But I thought that was so interesting too, in thinking about here and the idea of we'll give up the 5-yard out. That's fine. Go jump the post. Be there on the post. Don't give up the explosive. And also, if you're not trying to cover multiple things and you're not trying to do 1,000 things at once and your teammates are doing the same, you're not going to have the busts. And I think that's what killed this team last year. I mean, how many times did you get on our film review pods and go, they actually played pretty well outside of these 5 plays, but they're all explosives, and so they lost 35-0. And like that ability to not bust coverage and not give up explosives will take you from being the worst defense in the league and like historically bad to the middle of the pack just by not giving up the explosives. And then obviously you have to make plays to climb from there. But dear God, if they can just not give up the explosives, that would be incredible.
100%. And like I remember doing a case study with the Cincinnati Bengals a couple of years ago, talking about like how they went from a terrible offense to a good offense. And every statistical category almost across the board was the same. They were whatever they were in run defense year to year. The one thing that changed with them was that they added Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase added 35 explosives to the offense. So they went from I think it was the 27th most explosive offense to I think they were top 5. And so again, like to your point, if you can, as an offense, and I can speak to this, being an offensive coordinator at the high school, if you get one explosive, you're going to score points. Like and if you watch NFL football games, it's the same thing. If you get an explosive, you're in the red zone, you will score points. It's just too gosh darn hard to go 18 consecutive plays and score a touchdown. It's just too challenging. Defenses are too good. So I 100% agree with that. And I think, what was their explosive play percentage last year? Do you remember the defense? Like, was it the worst in the NFL? Probably close.
Yeah, it was not good. I don't remember the number.
So if you can just get that number back to baseline, back to middle of the pack, this defense is going to be significantly better. If all other metrics stay approximately the same, that one will improve scoring defense, will improve red zone defense, everything. So I totally agree. If you can just get those guys playing with a little bit more consistency and awareness and cohesion in the back end and give them that set of rules, it's so comforting to have those rules. I think they're going to be significantly better. And I think I'm excited to see, kind of transversely how Cliff finds explosive plays on offense. And we saw some of those today, which is great. So,
yeah, we saw the deep ball to Terry. I think definitely Cliff is someone who's going to use the screen game for some of that.
It's been showing up a little bit,
yeah, the screen game in certain areas of the field. So it's going to be exciting to see how they get that stuff detailed up and, which players they lean on, not just from like, hey, let's get the ball to Terry, but like, Wiley and Cosme are incredibly mobile, and do you use that mobility to create explosive plays in the screen game, for instance, or with some game plan run type of stuff? So it's going to be fun to watch Cliff scheme it up, and especially now that this is the first time we've seen Cliff be a full-time OC in a decade, because he was doing the head coach thing, and last year USC was a little bit different setup, but to dedicate full time to some creativity, we've already seen some of it, and I'm excited to see what that leads to. Last but not least, 52. Jamin's out there, basically full-time pass rusher right now, full-time edge guy, playing with the threes mostly. What have you seen so far? And he hasn't really played off-ball linebacker since OTAs. Like, what are we looking at here with Jamin Davis?
I think that's a really interesting question, obviously, and it's something that we talked about today. I've talked about it on the Command Center show. I've talked it on the Command Center podcast with Fred and Tana. Like, it's a point that I've been kicking around in my head a lot. Like, what is he for this defense? Like, he's an athletic guy, right, with long arms, and those guys tend to do well in the NFL. But like, the art of rushing the passer is very nuanced and finite, and so, like, does he figure it out? And the people that he's playing with on defense, again, I think we've been very clear. They've been very good about rotating people through, so it's hard to kind of distill a depth chart. But the people that he's been consistently playing with on defense don't appear like they're going to be making the roster. You know what I'm saying? Or they're gonna be fighting for roster spots.
They've rotated a lot of 1s and 2s, and like, there are certain positions where the 3s naturally, like receivers, DBs, where like that's a little more fluid. But front 7 O-line, like, they've been more consistent. 1s and 2s are together, and 3s are down the line. And like, Jamin currently is playing defensive line, and he is with the 3s.
Right, which is fair because he's learning a new position.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, how does that come along? And I think a lot of people are expecting to have him to have like a huge impact. He's going to play off ball, he's going to play on the ball. I don't know if I see that as of right now. There's still a lot of time left in training camp to kind of figure out a role and see if he figures out the skill set required to rush the passer. But I do think he's in a very interesting spot, very, very interesting spot in terms of usage. He kind of worked in with the first group on the punt team, but like we talked about, that they do such a good job of mixing and matching. It's like, is he actually on the first team, or was the third group to go the first team and they were just kind of a bunch of guys that want to get reps? It's really hard to get a feel because of kind of how much they're rotating guys. So again, I think a big, strong, athletic guy. Like him as a person. I think he works hard. It's just, I don't know what his role is. And like we've talked about this before, I don't know if since you've been covering the team or covering the NFL, I can't think of a dude to make this kind of position switch this late in the offseason and then make the team. Like, Niles did it, but Niles was a teams guy that had teams as a way to make the team. And then he did that tight end thing for 2 years before he finally figured out in year 3. So this is a very unique situation for sure.
You don't see position switches very often in the NFL. Like, you see it sometimes, guys coming out of college. I mean, Logan Thomas legit came into the NFL as a quarterback.
But then he had 4 years of kind of that transition to make it work. Obviously, there's some corner to safety conversions that happen in an off season, but that's usually kind of been in the works.
Very rare.
And again, for them to make an immediate impact in the same year they make the switch, I think is even more rare.
Right. I think I will say this on Jamin's behalf, / informationally for folks that don't get to catch every press conference and whatever, and where they're sourced for that. So here, I'm doing my job. Dan said today, I think his goal, or he thinks his goal with Jamin is he would love to have a situational pass rusher, right? He wants a guy, and he specifically said 2-minute and third down. So when we know the other team is dropping back every single snap or dropping back on a snap because it's third down, we can say, go out there and rush the passer. Because right now, he's actually playing full-time edge, and you see some of the first and second down stuff where it's like, hey, we need you to set an edge because you're the edge player, and that doesn't go particularly great. But he's not going to be asked to do that. It's just part of the cross-training, if you will, or part of how practice is running because of that particular script. But the one time we did see Jamin with some 2s was during 2-minute today. He was out there across from Dante Fowler with the 2s. And so I think that is the best hint we've gotten so far. And I will say too, like, one of my big praises of Dan Quinn is I think what Dan has said has matched what they've done. Sure. And obviously Jamin is going to work with whoever, but if he says like 2-minute and third down is where we think Jamin could make an impact, and then he goes out there and puts him next to Dante Fowler, who's absolutely making this team, and that is his role as the opposite edge, like, that is Dan following through on his words. I think they're serious about that. And if he's out there with the number 1 punt team, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to tell who the number 1 punt team is. Is Jeremy Reeves out there or not? And if he's out there with Revo, then that's how Jamin makes this team. Jamin makes this team being a dog on special teams who comes along enough as a pass rusher that he provides depth at that position.
Sure.
And then I think the question becomes, over the next 2 weeks, does he work back in with the off-ball linebackers and keep that part of his game, or has he become a pass rush specialist and special teamer? And if he can just ace those roles, then maybe he carves out a career. And if not, like, he better hope someone believes in him somewhere else, and his future is not going to be in Washington, as this is the final year of his contract.
Yeah, I do think that's a really fair characterization of his situation. But I think either way, whether you're looking at it from my perspective where it's a little bit more bleak or your perspective where it's slightly more optimistic, it's not like he's he's like an impact player as of this moment on the defense, it seems like, And so I think that's the thing I'm just trying to balance out.
And to be clear, I'm just saying I have clarity on where I think it goes, not that it's actually going to go there well. That's just that's the path. And I think he can travel the path is a different story.
And I think what I'm saying is I think the way you characterize that is perfect. It's like it's this very specific thing with team's value, like this very narrow lane. And I think there's this, like when I talk to Fred, he's like, oh, he's gonna be off the ball and be on the ball, and they're gonna use him all over the place. And I haven't seen it. And again, they might get to that at some point, but I have not seen that as of right now.
No. And I will say this too, talk about cross-training and versatility. Jordan McGee's been out there as an edge as well in certain situations. So like they're seeing what they got with a bunch of different dudes. And like, again, in a situation, we were talking about this on the sideline today. I'm going to do on the radio a 53-man roster projection here pretty soon, and I'm actually a little scared of doing it because there's going to be about 65 guys, 62 guys that I'm going to try to have to whittle down to 53 because as I've done our positional previews on the radio, there's too many guys at every single position.
100%.
And that makes a very specialized player very hard to put on the roster versus like, okay, if Jordan McGee is your fourth linebacker or third linebacker even, and he can pass rush off the edge, and he can play teams, like, why do you need a backup Jordan McGee when Jordan McGee is already a multi-purpose backup? And that becomes the hard needle to thread if you're Jamin Davis. But Jamin, it's worth pointing out, too, if you were to switch his 52 to a 92, all due respect to Dorrance Armstrong, sorry, we're stealing your jersey, but if we were to put a defensive end number on him,
he looks the part.
He looks the part. He's a big, strong, explosive athlete. And so there might be a point a week from now where it clicks for him and he turns into a potentially huge part of this team as a pass rusher. So we'll see. That's the fun of training camp. And, Take Command is your home for all of it. Continuing coverage on the Hoffman Show as well. Of course, 4 to 7 daily on the Team 980. And we will have 2 more fresh episodes of Take Command for you next week. That's pretty much it for us. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Put up some bonus interviews and stuff as well. So make sure that you're checking everything out here in the feed. That's it. That's all for Logan and me, Craig, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.